talk about that, Jay Johnson, in terms of the threat level to this country at this point. Where would you put it in terms of the disinformation that is spiraling out of control with no guardrails and now violent acts with clear connections to January 6th and others, no matter what a Republican might tell you, and they may want to say this is isolated, we have to wait for all the facts to come out and all that other stupidity because they don't want to face what really happened here. But if you could pull back and tell me what your concerns are for the threat to our homeland from within.
Mika, I'm going to look at the larger picture here. We're all a product of our circumstances and the times in which we grew up. I was born in 1957. That makes me a child of the 60s. In a 5-year period, we lost Medgar, Malcolm, Martin, Jack, and Bobby. Within a 5-year period, political assassinations on average once every 12 months. The environment we live in today is at least as combustible, if not more, than it was in the mid-1960s. What happened to Paul Pelosi, in some respects, he was lucky. This was a horrible attack. I feel terrible for the burden that Nancy Pelosi and her family must bear right now. But in many respects, we've been lucky. We were lucky that no member of Congress was not seriously injured on January 6th. We were lucky that the Vice President of the United States was not injured on January 6th. We've been lucky, and it shouldn't take someone dying for those in this country who command a microphone, who have a public voice, to decide we need to tone it down. On the right, and let's talk about the full spectrum. If it requires that we include within this conversation Brett Kavanaugh and Steve Scalise, we have to do that. But we shouldn't wait until someone dies before collectively we all say, hey, we've got to calm down.
But it goes beyond we in terms of, if you look at politicians, Republican politicians, or the media, or other, scapegoats. Admiral, it's all over the internet. The most powerful, richest man, one of the richest men in the world, Elon Musk, just took over Twitter. And one of his first acts as the new owner of Twitter was to tweet a conspiracy theory about this incident. How do we put this back, put the toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak?
I don't think it's gone back in the tube. And, that's a pretty lethal combination. Very, very rich individuals with strident political views and megaphones. It's like in Ghostbusters. You don't want the streams to cross. I think they're starting to cross. And what I worry about, not only what Secretary Johnson has said so eloquently, but also how is this received internationally? What is the view from abroad? Does this help our cohesion in NATO? Does this help our relationships in Asia? Of course not. So we're creating a witch's brew which will harm us both internally and abroad in the world.
And we should note the article that Musk retweeted, that he put out there, is from a publication that has claimed that Hillary Clinton died several years ago, and it's a body double since. So that shows you just the nonsense that he is putting out there to his 100-odd million followers. David Ignatius, with this. Oh, I'm sorry. Dave, we lost David. But let's just talk about this moment here, Secretary. We're 8 days to election. We're 8 days. And that there are some questions as to why the Speaker's house in San Francisco didn't have additional security. We know she wasn't there. The Capitol Police, her detail was with her. But what would you do, putting on your old hat for a minute, like in terms of safeguarding elected officials, but also candidates who are crossing the country right now in the stretch run of this campaign?
Very often it's a question of resources, Secret Service, Capitol Police. I don't want to get into the specific details of specific individuals, but very often, most often, security surrounds the protectee, the high-level government official, and we don't have the resources to protect the protectee's family, except in certain circumstances, or if the protectee has multiple homes, to have 24/7 watch on all the homes, on both homes. And in the case of someone like Speaker Pelosi, who is second in line to be president of the United States, who is probably the most on the right vilified Democrat in America, we need to take a hard look, and I'm sure the Capitol Police are doing this right now, about whether they need to step up the security around her, her family, and her homes.
So let's bring in Carolyn Gallagher to the conversation. She is a professor at American University who has researched far-right groups and paramilitaries in the United States. Also with us, presidential historian Jon Meacham. His new book is entitled And There Was Light, Abraham Lincoln and the American Struggle. A very important day to have John on. Carolyn, tell me first of all, your immediate takeaways from what happened to Paul Pelosi, but also if you could bring into the conversation what you have learned about what's been happening out in the country and the threat to our democracy, given that right now conspiracy theories about what happened to Paul Pelosi are running far more rampant than the facts out on the internet.
Well, my first thought when I heard about this was January 6th, the sort of "Where's Nancy?" I think that was echoed,
of course,
on that day by the failed insurrectionists. And so that was sort of, that sent a sort of tremor through me. It was a sad and scary moment. I think the conspiracy part of this that's so troubling is the flooding of the zone. So, we don't really have neutral arbiters of news anymore. Very few of them are left. And so people are in media bubbles. And so when Elon Musk, for example, tweeted what he did, that conspiracy theory, he was flooding the zone with inaccurate information. And what that happens in when you have a divided landscape is people don't know what to believe. And so they don't believe anything. And then they're very mistrustful and conspiratorial about everything. And so what you're seeing here with those conspiracy theories is, as you said earlier in the program, we're hearing more about the conspiracy theory than what actually happened.
Jon Meacham, we just heard from Mr. Secretary a minute ago evoking the 1960s in a time of assassinations, and this was apparently an assassination attempt for Speaker Pelosi. We just had you on the show all last week talking about your new book and how you spoke so eloquently about how some of the divides and the gaps in our country now reminded you of that era around the Civil War. Put this into some context for us. It seems to me we're in a very dark, dangerous place.
We are in a dark, dangerous place. And it's up to every one of us to get out of it. It's about both the leaders and the led. But the leaders, as the Admiral said, had a megaphone. And so what is said into that megaphone matters enormously. Words matter. The climate matters. When you look back at our most violent episodes, you can see the timeline moving toward that. So in the late 1850s, you have Preston Brooks, the South Carolina congressman, crosses the Capitol and nearly beats Charles Sumner, the abolitionist Massachusetts senator, to death with a cane. And the reaction in the white South was such that Brooks received gifts of canes. It became a token. It became a meme, if you will, a 19th century version of that. That's a sign we can see now of a sickness, that secession, that slavery, that so much of my native region was willing to put their own power ahead of the constitutional experiment. And it would ultimately lead to war. And 1968, exactly, the Secretary was mentioning it, exactly right. What happened to Paul Pelosi, remember, it always looks crazy and unlikely until it happens.
Yeah.